This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Mother's Day is almost here, and you can get her the most beautiful time-tested gift around. A watch she can wear every day from Movement. Whether mom's into classic dress watches, rare and refined ceramics, or tried and true bestsellers, Movement has something she'll love. And right now you can save big on the best Mother's Day gift ever with up to 50% off site-wide during Movement's Mother's Day sale at mvmt.com. Again, that's up to 50% off at mvmt.com.
We made this.
Welcome everyone to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. This is our special Fight the Future Minute podcast. I'm Kurt North, and you are listening to our coverage of minute 43 of the X-Files Fight the Future. To discuss this minute, I am joined once again by X-Cast patron Katie Doe. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Kurt. How are you?
Not too bad. We're getting to the end of the scene now. We're getting to the end of what Kurtzweil has to say. This has got quite a lot of information in it.
It does.
You said how many pages did you say in previous minute? How many pages that was dialogue that Kurtzweil had?
They said it was 4 pages of dialogue with this whole
4
conversation.
Pages. Okay, well that's the pages of dialogue to end all dialogues, isn't it? Really? So we are here to talk about minute 43, which begins at 42 minutes as Kurtzweil utters that we have no context what killed those men, which is referring to the bodies in Dallas. It ends on 42:59 with Kurtzweil instructing Mulder to go back to Dallas and dig. Yeah, so just overall with this whole scene in context, we've talked about the previous minutes, and this is kind of where we finish up really. As a whole in the film, you've talked last week about. I keep saying last week. You talked last episode about the unfortunate event in the cinema where it went off at this particular moment. But what do you make of this whole scene from Kurtzweil's apartment right through to the end of this scene? It's quite pivotal in a way. But what did you make of it overall? Really,
it is. It's really important. To me, it kind of reads like a little condensed version of the conspiracy. It helps in the film as well, but it also helps to bring in viewers who maybe don't know the show as well. So it's kind of like a little microcosm of how the conspiracy works and what they're planning to do. And so it's good info to give Mulder for this particular moment, but it's also good, I think, just to get out there as well. Yeah,
I mean, one of the things that I think is quite interesting with this is that it doesn't. It's probably a wrong thing to say, but this kind of condenses everything that you would expect in a conversation and maybe the truth when the truth came out, rather than having the long, winded, court scene with the full explanation, point by point,
recapping the whole show.
Recapping the whole show. Where this would have been quite nice, and I mean, obviously, we know the film's happened and whatever. It would have been quite nice to have aspects of this more than having the court scene that. Of threading things together. It would have been really interesting to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think we do see that though, don't we? So in this particular minute, we've got he says a lot. So it's a plague to end all plagues. But when he starts saying about men who bring it on, so he's obviously referring to the syndicate, and they've been working on it for 50 years. So this was released in 1998. So 1997, go back 50 years, 1947. So around the Roswell crash and or what we see in My Struggle 1 or whatever, but you've got the conspiracy kind of taking form 50 years ago. I think it's interesting that he uses the word gook. It's not something that, being from the UK, I'm assuming it's referring to so the Vietnam War and stuff, is it?
Yeah, actually, I had to look it up because I was like, I don't think I want to really say that, but yeah, it started with the Korean War and then the Vietnam War.
Right, yeah.
Very derogatory.
Yeah, I thought that. I was like, oh, is that a derogatory term? It's not something that I've come across before, but I thought it might be, especially with the fact that it's linked in with commies and whatever. So it's quite... It must come across as kind of quite a derogatory term and quite a visceral use of language, really, to kind of give you that idea that, you know, it's that important in the show overall. The timetable being set is also something that is referred to as well. We go back to Red Museum. There's, you know, FEMA does actually appear in The Truth as well on the green computer screen, in the glass computer screen, and obviously the deadline of colonisation. The way that Kurtzweil and Landau plays it is really good, isn't it? The way it delivers the dialogue.
It is, yeah. And my favorite quote is the way he says, "A silent weapon for a quiet war."
Yeah,
I love that. I remember that like clearly from seeing the movie for the first time.
Right, I mean, because mine as well is that men are secretly negotiating a planned Armageddon. I like that line as well.
Yep.
And it's interesting how, you know, if you look at this from Mulder's point of view, Mulder's only literally just started to believe again, hasn't he, after the events of the Patient X and the Red and the Black, where Krycek comes to him and says that there's this whole rebel alliance that's happening, which we don't see here. And I know a lot of people have issues with that. I personally don't, because I feel that this is an incident that's happened rather than being, you know, like a continuation of the story. This is like something that wasn't planned for. This isn't something that's this thing. Same as what happened with the rebels as well, that it's not something that's planned. This is just something that's occurred, and they've suddenly realised after all the plans that they've been putting into place that, you know, this is going to be different, and the work is kind of is going out the window in some ways. But Kurtzweil's talking within this minute that he's given us all these lines about a silent weapon for a quiet war, as you've said, the systematic release of indiscriminate organism for which men who bring on still have no cure. So he's talking about the black oil. They've been working on this for 50 years, talking about 47, and that the rest of the world have been fighting, as you say, goose and commies, a planned Armageddon. It's really well, as you said, it's really well condensed and told from that point of view, but it's just the way, almost like a snapshot. Mulder saying negotiating with whom really brings us back to where Mulder is in his current run, where we see season 5 that he struggles with believing in everything that he's seen, and he becomes a skeptic in a lot of ways, where the Patient X and Red and Black bring him back round with Krycek talking about resisting or serving. But you still have this little inkling that, I mean, I know this was filmed well before, but this little inkling that Mulder's been a bit, well, with whom, what you're talking about, where really, this far down the line, he should know with whom. I don't know if that's what you come across.
I did, yeah. I do like how Kurzweil says, "I think you know," instead of, you know, trying to spell it out for him. Yeah. You know, deep down, Mulder does know. And you can tell by the look that, you know, appears on his face. He just didn't want to necessarily admit it. And
it goes back to that, as I say, the timetable has been set, going back to that whole FEMA appearing in the Truth, the 2012 deadline, which has always been in the background somewhere. They've never really said it, but it's in Patient X and Red and Black. They say, you know, well, 15 years away from that, or, you know, as I say, in Red Museum, they talk about the date as well in kind of loose terms. But there's all of these it feels like at this point in time of the show that Chris Carter's definitely got some sort of aspiration to where he wants to go now, whereas in the past sometimes you can feel it's a bit well, I've decided to do this or I've decided to do that. There's definitely a formulation of of the conspiracy as a whole, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
And then Mulder says, "And they call me paranoid," in almost like a whisper. So Kurtzweil then gets stopped mid-sentence here, but just as we go, he says, "Go back to Dallas, Agent Mulder, and dig." And that's when the minute finishes. But he then basically says, "We're going to find out along the rest of the country when it's too late." So with this minute, it really is condensed. Within 59 seconds, we've got a really condensed piece of storytelling, and it wraps up everything. I mean, this is the scene where it's been filmed indoors, I think, pretty much. I think I've seen that on a few things. You get to see some of the alleyway and whatever. It's been quite tight. So what did you make of the way that Kurtzweil and Mulder bounce off each other? Because Mulder's literally got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He's got 10 words. So whereas Kurtzweil's got a lot.
Oh yeah, he's got to spell it all out. Just the acting is fantastic. So you get really caught up in the back and forth, and the way it's filmed, I think, is excellent. And I like it. It's I don't feel like it's being condensed for the sake of being dumbed down. I think it makes sense in the context of the film.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You're perfectly right with that. I think that that's something to bear in mind. That this is kind of like, as we'd come to expect in JFK, for example, in Oliver Stone's JFK, where there's a lot of information. It's a lot longer than this, but this is definitely more confined, condensed, and direct and to the point. But at the same time, the way that Landau delivers it is got that, as I say, that deep throat kind of, all the president's men kind of thing, with the whole aspect of him speaking slightly under his breath. That he's we've got this marks no score, as I mentioned before, kind of rolling over. That you've got the stakes really feel like they're going to be really high. That this then leads to what will be Scully's autopsy, which we'll go back to in the morgue, which is our next minute. So thank you very much for coming on, Katie. Have you got anything else you'd like to say about this minute before we wrap up and pass it on to the next guest and host?
Just something I thought of quickly. As we were talking about it, it reminds me of My Struggle too. The way he says it's going to happen on a holiday, people are away.
Yeah.
The way the virus is going to be systematically released, it just brings to mind that episode. And
yeah, I mean, how did you feel that what they were meaning by that systematically released? I mean, the soda pop things obviously call into play there, of the bees and things.
Yeah.
Again, did you like the way that this is? What's the best way of putting it? Is abstract enough that it's not really saying it's saying everything it needs to say, but it's not really really hitting it home, saying, being on the nose, saying this is going to happen, that's going to happen, this is going to happen. It's more of an abstract thought for Mulder to really kind of condense and chew up, so you can get an idea before we move on to the rest of the film. Yeah,
it's definitely, this is the wider plan. It's definitely not details.
Yeah.
But, the way he calls it an indiscriminate organism, it, makes me think that they're not really picking and choosing.
Yeah. And we're not in a position either to tell whether or not how much Kurtzweil actually was involved, because he might be doing these tests, going back to the gynecology thing, that he may well have been doing these tests with, say, the black oil, but he doesn't know what it is.
Right, and well, he says there is still no cure. I mean, it makes me wonder, is he aware of the vaccine that they're working on in secret, or has he been out of the loop for long enough that he's unaware of it?
Yeah, because I mean, the events of Patient X and the Red and the Black, Krychek brings that cure, which is the kind of thing I really like, that the fact that Krychek is or Patient X and Red and the Black brings this virus to a head, eventually. I know this will be talked about in later minutes, but the fact that we've got a virus that is now curable, or we have a form of vaccine from the Russians, which kind of brings in that, but it's done in a way where, he's saying we still have no cure. For those people who avid viewers of the show know there is actually potentially a cure now. But for those watching the film, you don't need to know that. It's just saying, we don't have a cure for it. The stakes are really high. So I really like that kind of to and fro, really.
Yeah, yep.
Right, okay, so that wraps up our latest Fight the Future Minute. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We're going to be passing on to a new host and guest, as I say, so we will look forward to listening to them. I will be back in the future. Katie will be back as well, so you'll hear us with different partners. Where can people find you online, Katie?
I'm on Twitter at Designer Doe, and I'm in the XCast basement quite a bit.
You can find me. My Twitter handle is at @Muldrake. It's RMULDRAKE. And that's a play on Reynard Muldrake, which is a season 3 episode of The X-Files. You can also find my Millennium podcast, which is a spin-off show from The X-Files, starring Lance Henriksen, and we're covering that at the moment. That's due to be back. That should be on the air as we speak. And that is at the Time Is Now pod, so you'll be able to find that. And earlier in the year, we also had my Pick Up a Podcast, which was, so that was lovely little interviews that I've done, with likes of Matt Latham, for Pick a Disc, for example, was a particularly good one. And so that's where you can find me. So until next time, everyone, trust no one.
Previously on the We Made This Network. Free with this month's issue.
And also, I wonder if Tim Harrington and Colin have been in the same room together.
I've still got slightly more hair.
Because you go on the Wikipedia page, and for a moment I thought Colin was wearing a multicoloured feather jacket.
I am. Yeah, I am.
Yeah. If you were on a Skype call, you'd see that.
But, I'm not in Les Savvy Fab.
Cinemortuary.
A lot of interesting things with that mechanic, couldn't you? I'm sure the sequels probably play into it. Like, if it's not your turn to die, people just jump out of planes and shit and they're fine.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. That'd be a good one. Yeah.
Do, yeah.
But then again, as a character, would you risk that in case it was your turn? In case there's like some information you didn't know about, someone else has been saved, therefore it's your go now.
I mean, if I knew it were going to come eventually, I would absolutely get some knuckle dusters on and fight my way into the White House just with my fists. Just like, I mean, if you're going to go out anyway, just like man in polo neck charges into White House, takes down 300 Secret Service, shits on Donald Trump's face and kills him by slamming his head in a drawer.
Life's milestones.
So, what do you think? Are we going to go with compostable, Chris?
I like that as an idea. Well, there's the Hunter S. Thompson firework idea I quite like as well.
What's that?
You had these ashes loaded into a rocket and just shot up in it as a firework.
Amazing.
Whether that's true or not, that's the legend has it. Anyway.
Well, you get quite a lot of ashes. You could have a firework. You could then have some thrown into your garden, or you could then have some in a necklace for somebody else. You get a lot of ashes, and you don't need a lot of ashes to make.
It's a weird thing. I don't know if I know anyone who's been cremated and then had the ashes. I must do, but I can't imagine having someone's ashes in the house. So that feels faintly creepy. I would follow various kind of dog forums on Facebook, and you can get dog ashes. And
I've got my cat's ashes. I've got cat ashes on the mantelpiece.
I can somehow see that more than a fellow human.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Did you know that most vitamin D3 supplements come from sheep's wool? I'm Kat, founder of Ritual. We're making traceability the new standard for the supplement industry. When I was pregnant, I couldn't find a multivitamin I could trust, so I created my own. Ours is made traceable, third-party tested, and clean label project certified. Oh, and our vitamin D3? It comes from sustainably harvested lichen from England, not sheep. Trace for yourself with 25% off at ritual.com/podcast.